Welcome, everybody. I'm David Muller, Representative Secretary Gina Fiandaca here. Welcome to a meeting of the Boston Region MPO Planning Organization. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process regardless of your age, your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. Read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostmpo.org/MPO_NON_DISCRIMINATION. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Sean Rourke via the chat box at srourke@ctps.org or 857-702-3693. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Sean Rourke of the MPO staff at srourke@ctps.org or 857-702-3693. Please call the roll.
Mass DOT seat 1.
This is David Muller. I'm sorry. Is that me?
Yep. Just
David
making
Muller.
sure.
I'm here.
All right. Mass DOT seat 2.
I do not see John Bouchard yet.
Okay. Mass DOT highway.
I also do not see John Romano.
Okay. MBTA. I think I saw Allie Clayman. Are you here for MBTA?
Oh, hello. Sorry, I could not unmute myself. Yes, good morning. This is Allie Clayman, representing General Manager Eng and the MBTA.
Thank you. Massport.
This is Sarah Lee representing Massport.
MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barassa with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
MBTA Advisory Board.
Morning, Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board.
Advisory Council.
Lana Diggins, Advisory Council here.
City of Boston BTD.
I do not see Matt Moran.
Okay. Or Jen Rowe.
No.
Okay. City of Boston BPDA.
Also not seeing Jim Fitzgerald or Joe Blankenship.
Right. At-large city, City of Everett.
Morning, Jay Monty, representing Mayor DeMaria and the City of Everett.
At-large city, City of Newton.
Good morning, this is David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
At-large town, Town of Arlington.
Good morning, John Leslie representing the Town of Arlington.
Right. At-large town, Town of Brookline.
Morning all, Rob King representing Town of Brookline.
Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Morning, this is Brad Rawson representing the City of Somerville, Mayor Katiana Ballantyne and the MAPC Inner Core Subregion.
Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton.
Good morning, Kristen Guichard, representing the Magic Region on behalf of Acton Select Board Member Dean Charter.
Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
I do not see Dennis Giambetti.
Thank you. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
I am not seeing Darlene or Dylan.
North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
I do not see Melissa Tintakis.
Thank you. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
Not seeing Chris Diorio or Donna Purcell.
Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Medway.
Also not seeing Peter Pelletier.
Okay. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood, Neponset River Regional Chamber.
Steve Olenoff, representing the Trick subregion.
Okay, thank you. And I'll go back to Mass DOT Highway. I believe we have a representative for that. Aaron, can you unmute like Lyris?
Good morning, Ligis Floto, on behalf of John Bouchard for Mass Highway Design, Highway Division.
Thank you. All right. Oh, sorry.
John Romano's here, Jim Fitzgerald's here, Darlene Wynn's here, so you might want to go back and catch them.
All right. So we do have John Romano. Will John Romano or Lyris be representing for Mass DOT Highway?
John Romano, Mass DOT Highway.
All right, thank you. And we have Jim Fitzgerald. Yes.
Yep. Jim Fitzgerald, BPDA, representing Mayor Wu and City of Boston, and Matt Moran from BTD will be joining in a few minutes.
All right, thank you. And we also have Darlene Wynn. All right, so I'll just go to our ex officio members to wrap up. Federal Highway Administration.
Good morning, Ken Miller, Federal Highway.
Okay, thank you. And Federal Transit Administration.
I do not see anyone from FTA.
All right, I believe that calls the roll.
Thank you, Judy. Next item on the agenda is the chair's report. I don't have one, so we'll go directly to Tegan's report. Whenever you're ready, Tegan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you can go to the next slide, please. So I just wanted to highlight for the board that we do still have a number of open positions that are posted on our careers page. We are making progress in narrowing down candidates for a few of them, but we're also still looking for candidates for multiple of them. So I would ask if any board members or anyone listening here can help us continue to spread the word about these positions. I would greatly appreciate it. And the next slide. So just continuing with our engagement activities that we've been talking about around the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan. We held a workshop last week, staff held a workshop on coordination for these services in the Boston region. And we had a number of stakeholders, including councils on aging, disability commissions, transit providers, and others come and give us really great feedback about the needs and priorities for improved coordination. So I wanted to thank those who participated and worked with us to develop some strategies and actions that we could consider. And thank you also for those of you who shared the invitation with your colleagues, as it was a successful event. And then I wanted to remind the board and others listening that there is a survey that continues to be available for people to fill out about the needs and priorities for human services transportation. So that link to that survey is in the link. So if you would like any more information about the Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan or have any questions about the workshop or the survey, please contact Stella Jordan at sjordan@ctps.org. And then there are also some engagement activities coming up next week around the Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. We'll be hosting 2 open houses, one on May 8th at 6 p.m. and the other on Thursday at May 11th at 2 p.m. And staff will be available to answer questions about the draft federal fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP, which is out for public comment. So more information about those events are also being posted to the chat, and they're on the MPO calendar. So please also help us spread the word with anyone who you think might be interested. Moving on to the next slide, please. So we have 2 action items for you today. One is a work scope that's called MBTA Sources of Community Value. And the other is an amendment to the federal fiscal year 23 to 27 TIP, where we will ask you all to vote to release the amendment for a 21-day public review period. And then we will have a discussion, kind of a continued discussion following up in the last meeting about sizing the long-range transportation plan investment programs. And then our next meeting is scheduled for May 18th, and that will be where we will ask the board to vote to endorse TIP Amendment 4, as well as a few other items. We are working on and may be able to present a work scope for additional multimodal modeling for the Austin Multimodal Project, the Austin I-90 Multimodal Project. And then we are also hoping to have presentations on the LRTP needs assessment from staff, and then also from Mass DOT about the Sumner Tunnel Project, which is partially funded by MPO target funds. So that's what we hope to have. I wanted to highlight it because I think there are items of interest for board members and others listening. And I hope you can join us there. And also just to remind folks, we have a number of A&F committee meetings continuing to work on finalizing a draft of the operations plan for the MPO. The 2 dates coming up are listed here, May 11th and May 18th. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions. People have them.
Thank you, Tegan. Any questions for Tegan? Seeing and hearing none, next item on the agenda is public comments. Is there anyone in the public who would like to comment at this time? Seeing and hearing none, if you want to comment during the meeting, please raise your hand and we will try to call on you. Next item on the agenda is committee chairs reports. Are there any? Derek Cravat.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention that the UPWP committee met last on April 27th, and the details for that meeting can be found on the CTPS meeting calendar. The committee voted to approve of a funding scenario for the discrete studies in the fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program, and an update to the full MPO board will be provided either late May or early June, along with an update on the UPWP development. So thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions for Derek? Seeing none. Brian Kane.
Thanks, David. Just wanted to report that the A&F committee met this morning. We continued our discussion on the operations plan, which we expect to have for this board to consider in the early summer. We discussed agency information sharing and how that get better two-way communications. And we also received updates on the state fiscal year 23 operating budget through the third quarter, as well as on how we're doing on the projected overhead rate for the end of the state fiscal year. Top line is that things are going well financially, but of course could be better. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian? Seeing none. Next item on the agenda is the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Lynn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we have not had a meeting since our last MPO meeting, but our upcoming meeting on next Wednesday will have a focus on resilience. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the minutes of March 30th. Can we get a motion in a second to approve, and please state your name for the record? Brian Kane.
Brian Kane moves to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you. Eric Barassa.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Any comments, changes, questions, or suggestions? Seeing none, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Allie Clayman,
Allie Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Brian Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Geisha abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
You forgot to call Lyris, who's here representing John Bouchard.
Oh, okay. I thought she was seconding
I
for
know.
John Romano. I'm sorry, Lyris.
That's okay. Yes.
Great, thank you. That calls the roll.
Thanks, Judy. Next item on the agenda is a work scope for MPK Sources of Community Value. Paul Christner, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. My name is Paul Christner. I'm the manager of the Transit Analysis and Planning Group at CTPS. I'm here this morning to present a work program for the MBTA Sources of Community Value project. Proposed motion is that the MPO board votes to approve this work program. The client is the MBTA. The client supervisor is Elizabeth Winters Ronaldson. Rebecca Morgan is the project principal, and I'm the project manager. The funding source is MassDOT directed PL funds. The schedule is 7 months from the notice to proceed, and the budget is $125,000. This study is supported in full with non-MPO funding. Committing MPO staff to this project will not impinge on the quality or timeliness of MPO funded work. Since March of 2020, the MBTA has relied on one-time federal funding to cover its operating deficit and fund capital projects. As the Commonwealth emerges from the COVID-19 pandemic and farebox revenue is not returned to pre-pandemic levels, the revenue composition that supports the MBTA must evolve. Potential new revenues could come from updates to existing sources or from new sources such as congestion charges, transit tax, increment financing, or new taxing authority. To ensure the MBTA can continue to provide safe, sustainable, and equitable transportation services, it is important to explore mechanisms that increase the financial benefits that the MBTA can derive from the value it generates. CTPS will document and evaluate options for the Commonwealth to consider, including estimates of the revenue and other value that could accrue to the MBTA were any of these options to be implemented. This study will build on previous work by the MBTA, which focused on best practices globally, or funding models and sources of operating and capital funding. CTPS will identify, quantify, and propose mechanisms to accrue incremental sources of value and revenue for the MBTA outside of the existing developer mitigation framework. This work will help inform state leadership about the variety of potential funding mechanisms to support transit service. The work program is divided into 3 tasks. Task 1 is to review previous work. CTPS will review previous studies and related work, including funding practices from peer agencies, and summarize findings to establish the baseline for this work. Task 2 will evaluate the Massachusetts context for sources of revenue. Based on the findings in Task 1, CTPS will assess the feasibility of modifying existing revenue streams and or implementing new revenue streams to support the MBTA. And Task 3 is documentation and assessment. CTPS will document its findings and assess the new funding streams in the form of a technical memorandum. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions. I believe there may also be some folks from the MBTA here to answer questions. And if not, I request that the board please approve this scope of work.
Thank you, Paul. Lynn, you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So does this study is it looking at current development, or is it also going to consider future development?
Len, I'm not sure I quite understand the question in terms of.
So you're looking to look at revenue streams that don't currently exist that can help fund the T, correct?
Yes.
And so are those revenue streams, are you looking primarily at the revenue streams from developments that already exist, or are you also going to be looking at potential future developments?
When you say developments, do you mean real estate developments? Or
yeah. So for TOD, right? Because you're primarily trying to encourage more TOD, right?
No. So let me jump in. Lynn, this is not about TOD. This is about the T is interested in looking at other ways to fund transit service.
Okay.
The T has a budget shortfall. They've asked CTPS to look at what other countries and other states and other localities do. And it's not about development. It's about things like, I'm just throwing one out, tax increment financing, where you'd assess, an additional tax on businesses within a per mile of transit stops, for example, or if we ever move to congestion pricing, some of that pricing could go to the T. So it's not about Todd, and it's not about development specifically. It's about revenue sources that the T might be interested in tapping in if they ever got the legal authority to do so. I think, is that right, Paul?
Yeah, I think, and again, I don't know if anyone from the T is here as well to say anything, but I think that's the general gist of it. It's looking at different possibilities to fund the T, and it's a research project to find out what possibilities might be there to inform state leadership about the different options.
And thanks for answering the question, because I mean, that was essentially my question. It's like, is it about what we currently have? And essentially that is the answer. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome, man. Brian Kane.
Thank you. So folks might be aware that the MET Advisory Board has a role in the T's operating and capital budget developments. I actually have them both right now in my purview. So we report out at the end of this month. I just wanted to note that this is a really important study. The T is looking at what some folks are calling the fiscal cliff, and others are calling the fiscal calamity in 2025. State capital sources basically dry up in 25 as projects like GLX and South Coast Rail come online. Red Orange Line cars theoretically are built. Its operating budget, as this presentation noted, has been propped up by one-time funds. And that is expected to dry up at the end of the next fiscal year. And they've basically only been able to sort of limp along based on the fact that they have so many vacant positions that are budgeted for but not filled. Hopefully that will end at some point as ridership returns and they can begin to deliver a quality product on a regular basis. So the T has been in a cyclical deficit on its operating budget since 2001. Never really had a balanced budget since then, and so it does need to find additional resources if it's going to operate the system that we need, let alone the one we want. And so while I think that this study can help move us in that direction, this is not to say that this study will actually, it's not the end all. It's really the beginning of what will be a long journey if we even decide to go down that road. But I think this is an important place to start. And so I urge my colleagues to approve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Jim Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So is this kind of the start of a much bigger effort by the MBTA to kind of look at these challenges in a longer term, more robust fashion, or is this just kind of like a one-off? I'm just curious about the process after this, or how this fits into maybe something bigger.
Well, I think the T would answer that question. Allie, can you answer that question?
Lizzie Winters Ronaldson is at the meeting. She's been working with CTPS on this, so I will defer to her.
Thanks. I didn't know you were Lizzie.
My name is Lizzie Winters Ronaldson. I'm the project sponsor from the MBTA. This is as Brian mentioned earlier, is the start of the journey. We don't know where we'll land from this study and what will come after it, but this is the T looking at ways that we could identify new sources of revenue to support transit. But what happens after that is to be determined, as is the results of the study itself.
Okay. I mean, I feel like, this region and city and state, we've been exploring these options for a long time and just haven't had much success. So obviously it's very important work, and just wondering if there's like a opportunity for coordination with municipalities or continued coordination with the MPO. I think, I don't know if you've sorted that out, but I think we would want to kind of be involved and at least informed as the work progresses, because as I think everyone's going to say, it's very important work and effort to try to get right. So I don't know if you know that, but I guess that's a request to just, I guess we would like to be involved as this work unfolds. So
Absolutely.
Brad Rawson.
Thank you, Chair. I would echo and amplify what Jim Fitzgerald just noted. This board, our member municipalities, nonprofit and business associations are critical thought partners for the MBTA. So we will do our best to support staff. Chair, I want to note that the MBTA's long-term capital and operating budget stability is a source of statewide benefit and region-wide benefit. I want to make sure that the record notes that this board believes that the MBTA is a statewide and regional asset and not something that applies unique benefit only to municipalities served. We all benefit, all 6.5 million of us. And as a result, these types of efforts are of critical importance, setting us up for the next generation of safe, reliable service, as well as capital investment and system expansion. So with that, Chair, I would like to make a motion that this board support this request for this study to be approved. Thank you.
Steve Olenoff, question?
Yes, I know that MAPC has for a while now been supporting and raising legislation that would allow individual cities and towns, either separately or getting together, to raise money through additional taxation for both highway and transit projects. So I was wondering if that would, and I know this is done across the country that way. So does this study include looking at that?
Paul?
Yeah, I think we could certainly talk to MAPC and the T and see if that's one of the things that we want to prioritize and put forward as part of this.
Brian, you want to go ahead and second Brad's motion, and then I'll call him Eric, and I'll continue taking comments.
second
Brad
Brad's
jumped my
motion.
and made a motion, so there's a second. Now, Eric.
Thank you. I was also gonna second the motion. I was gonna say, Brad, or Paul rather, yeah, we've done a fair amount of research into things around value capture and looked at, innovative transit finance and over the past, I want to say, decade plus. So happy to connect and share with any of our learnings and any partners from across the country. Good to talk to, but definitely supportive of this, and really glad that this is something the MBTA is initiating, and hoping that the new board will can be educated by this and become vocal in wanting to see improve finances for the team.
Thanks, Eric. That'd be great.
Ken Miller.
Thank you, David. I would just like to mention some of the resources that Federal Highway has in this area. We have a value capture initiative. We have an Office of the Innovative Finance that has 2 experts on value capture. Remember, value capture was one of our everyday counts, around 5 initiatives. There is the value capture website, and even as we speak, there is a 2023 value capture webinar series that is beginning, and it talks about over probably there are about 40 different value capture strategies that Federal Highway has developed, accumulated information on, including case studies and those kinds of things. So that could be a resource. If you can send that information over to you, David, and if you can get that to the appropriate folks, that would be great. And also just one question, and I know I've asked this before, so if somebody can refresh my memory. What is MassDOT directed PL funding?
Sure, that's the PL funding, what used to be 5303 until we did a unified contract. That's this
Right.
share that is directed by MassDOT as opposed to directed by MAPC or the MBTA.
Okay, so the portion of the combined funding that used to be 5303 is considered directed by MassDOT. Is that what you're saying? Right?
Yes, there is a long-standing agreement at the MPO about dividing transit planning funding among 3 entities. And one is MassDOT, and one is, I think, MAPC, and the other, I think, is maybe the MPO itself. That long predates your time here, Ken, let alone my time.
I am. Okay, thank you. I know I asked
You're
you before, but thank you.
No worries. David Kozis.
Thank you. Of course, we're all very supportive of this study. I'm only just wondering if this study is only just looking at funding opportunities for the MBTA, or is it also maybe looking at funding opportunities for any or all of the other transit providers that operate in the state?
I think the answer is this work scope is drafted is limited to the MBTA.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Brian Kane.
Sorry, that was up from earlier.
Oh, okay. Any other questions before we vote on this? We do have a motion in a second. Seeing none, motion having been made and seconded, please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
Lyris Leotode,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Allie Clayman,
Allie Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard James, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Gerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
All right, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Judy. Next item on the agenda is the TIP amendment number 5. Ethan LaPointe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager for the Boston Region MPO. The purpose of this presentation today is to summarize the contents of Amendment 5 to the current TIP for federal fiscal years 2023 to 2027, with a vote coming at the end of this presentation requesting a release for a 21-day public comment period. If we can go on to the next slide to summarize what the contents of Amendment 5 are. These changes are within the federal fiscal year 2023 program, and Amendment 5 includes a cost increase for a project in Wilmington that is state highway funded. It is a bridge replacement project for Butters Row over the MBTA's commuter rail tracks. It also programs 2 new design earmarks for the Border to Boston rail trail segments out in Peabody and Salem, and includes a separate design earmark for Wakefield's Broadway commuter rail crossing, which is a rail grade crossing project. There are also funding adjustments here for 3 Metro West RTA projects. These funding adjustments coming in line with rebalances in the amount of RTA capital funding allocated to the projects versus federal Section 5307 funds. We go on to the next slide just to start off with some of the changes by program, and starting first with Wilmington's bridge replacement project. This is a bridge replacement for bridge ID W383, Butters Row over MBTA, Butters Row being the facility carried. The project cost for this project has increased from its current budget estimate of $10.2 million up to $16.4 million. Project cost here has increased in part due to the identification of additional structural elements in need of being addressed as part of construction, and increases to utility and construction costs, namely inflationary impacts. There's also consideration for potential busing needs, in this case shuttle operations, given that this bridge traverses MBTA tracks. That said, those operations have not yet been identified as necessary, but there is contingency baked into this project should additional funds be needed for flag persons or any kind of shuttles. If we move on to the next slide for the Border to Boston Trail projects, these are 2 community project earmarks, each of which amount to $375,000 for a total of $750,000. These are new projects to the tip, given they program new design earmarks only. Therefore, there is no construction funding included in these earmarks, and make an investment in what is known as the Border to Boston Trail. This trail not only traverses the Boston region, but also continues northward into Merrimack Valley's region. There are also other earmarks programmed for other municipalities to perform their own design. However, for purposes of this amendment, this includes PBD's section of the trail and also Salem's section of the trails here. These trails all composed a much larger investment in the Essex National Heritage Area for off-road multi-use paths. Moving on to the next slide, for the third earmark included in this presentation is Wakefield's Broadway Commuter Rail project. This is also a design funding line item here. Again, this is a new project using an earmark. The funding for this project in the amount of $250,000 will fund the design and engineering of quad railroad gates at the location where the MBTA commuter rail near Wakefield Station, where it traverses Broadway in Wakefield, will be adjusted to improve pedestrian and ADA Americans with Disabilities Act mobility enhancements across that MBTA grade crossing. These are safety measures that are being implemented and are required from the Federal Railroad Administration in order to meet quiet zone requirements, namely in order to ensure the safety of all users throughout that grade crossing. And with that, if we move on to the next slide, just to cover 4 of the changes to some of the Metro West projects here. These changes here represent reallocations and re-estimations of federal Section 5307 funding for transit service operations, maintenance, and other activities from transit operators and providers, in addition to rebalances in the amount of state capital funding that is used by the Metro West RTA, starting off with an increase of $65,000, up from $150,000 to $215,000 for the acquisition of bus supportive equipment and facilities. This project has now been funded in full for that $215,000 amount with state RTA capital funding. Similarly, the electronic signboard line item has decreased from $200,000 to $50,000 because it is now fully state funded. That is a delta downward of $150,000. And while that went $150,000 down, the electric vehicle migration line item has increased in budget by $150,000 to allocate additional resources there, such that it is now fully state capital funded, increasing from $100,000 of budget to $250,000 of budget for that transition towards more electric vehicle investment within Metro West's fleet. There's also been an adjustment in Metro West operating assistance for non-fixed route ADA paratransit service line items. The funding balance here, which is currently at around $2.6 million, has been revised downward to $1.7 million to reflect the actual amount of Section 5307 funding that was apportioned for use by Metro West RTA and therefore can be programmed in this project. This is a downward delta of $918,000. With that, today's requested action from staff are that the board votes to release Amendment 5 for a 21-day public comment period. The public comment period for this amendment would commence tomorrow, May 5th, and conclude on May 26th, with expected endorsement at the June 1st MPO board meeting.
Thank you, Ethan. Any questions for Ethan? Lynn Diggins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just going to I just want a little more explanation on things. Can you back up a slide, please? So I just didn't understand. I understood every word, but still didn't quite get the meaning on the last item here. So it's reflecting the actual apportionment of funding. And I'm sorry, I'm a little dense here. So what exactly is reflecting?
Yes, so the programmed amount for this project initially reflected an expectation of available funding to support non-fixed route and ADA paratransit service operations from Metro West RTA. However, the total amount of funding that was actually allocated to Metro West RTA, given the context of this amendment, was actually less than that expected amount, and therefore was revised downward to reflect that actual amount of allocation.
I see.
Then let me help. So RTAs, unlike the MBTA, are authorized to spend capital funds on operating costs, but only a certain limited portion of their capital funds are eligible. Every year, there's an apportionment of 5307 funds, and then there's a split between the MBTA and the RTAs. And then based on that amount of money, there's a percentage that RTAs can use to operate operating costs as opposed to capital. Still capital dollars, but eligible for operating costs. Originally, when they filed the tip, Metro West thought they'd have 2.6 million of operating capital costs. Ended up being 1.7. This is just a clarification that they don't actually have 2.6. They have 1.7.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You really understand me. You know, you understand what I don't understand. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. So on the top item here, so it's now fun. So the value went up. Is that kind of the same deal, Mr. Chair, or Ethan?
I believe in that case, and I think we might have some folks from Metro West, if I'm wrong here on this call. In this case, the actual amount of money that's been allocated to the project has been increased, and that was done in tandem with a rebalancing of the amount of Section 5307 funding as well. Okay. So it's also an increase in funding in addition to the rebalance of sources.
All right. So not a bad thing. Now, can we go up the previous slide? I guess 3 more. And so next one. Yeah, so this one. And so what are these structural elements? And how much is inflation? I know you're not going to be able to tell me inflation. I've asked it every time. I never get it. We just don't know. I wish we did know, have a better handle. But what are the structural elements?
I can't speak exactly to the actual substance of what's included in the engineering contract as far as what this bridge needs without looking at the inspection report. So I can follow up on that, but according to what I received from the engineer on the contract, a lot of this was driven by materials costs and other pricing increases from inflation, just as well as the bridge condition itself.
So most of it was inflation. I mean, it's just that the cost, the difference is so huge. I'm just kind of losing confidence in our ability to predict what anything's going to cost when, like, the delta is like 50%. It's one thing when the number is large, but percentage is small. But when the percentage is huge, it's like, so, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Ken Miller.
Just quickly on the Wilmington one, it seems like it's a replacement, so it's not clear why the current condition of the bridge would be relevant in terms of scoping. But the question a question about the earmarks. I think it would be helpful going forward if you could actually denote what the number of the earmark is and what year it is. It will be helpful for me so we can check with our records. I'm presuming these are 2022 HIP earmarks. If you can put the ID number in, that would be great. And also for the Wakefield one, who is actually doing the design? Is that money? Is that going to the town, or is that going to the who doing that, or municipal rail and things?
I would have to check on who is actually implementing the design as part of that investment there, because that I do not know. Okay,
and then for the border to Boston one, I have that listed as 1.2 million. So we'll be seeing other earmarks for other communities as part of this, down the road in Merrimack Valley.
Yeah, those are communities outside the Boston MPO.
So the money. So
yeah, this border Boston goes all the way up into Merrimack Valley and beyond. And so yes, I believe they've already been done. Derek.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we've amended in 2 other earmarks for design into the Merrimack Valley MPO tip. Those were for the towns of Boxford and Newberry. And then these are the 2 in the Boston region.
Great. Okay, thank you.
And on the Wakefield question, I just wanted to clarify that the town will be implementing that design. There was some coordination with the MBTA, and it was determined that the town would be taking that one on. So just wanted to answer that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. Any other questions? Ethan, do you have your hand up because you have something you need to say before I take a motion?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to add, with regard to the structural elements I referenced earlier, the structural element was the addition of additional need for retaining walls on the bridge structure, just to clarify there,
Thank you,
outside
Ethan.
of the current structure.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, can I get a motion in a second to release this for a 21-day public review process? Lynn Diggins.
After giving Ethan a hard time, I'm happy to approve the release of the event for public review.
Thank you. There's a motion. Eric Barassa.
I'll second the motion.
Motion has been made and seconded. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
Lyris Leotode,
Lyris Leotode, yes.
John Romano,
Don Romano, yes.
Ali Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, yes.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, yes.
Great, motion carries, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the long-range transportation plan investment program sizing. Bradley Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about investment program sizing and Destination 2050, the long-range transportation plan, following up from discussions and decisions that this board has made in recent meetings. Next slide, please. So at the most recent MPO meeting, the board voted to approve a list of projects to include in the long-range transportation plan. Projects shown on this slide are the MPO projects from among them. You'll see that the first two projects on the list in Norwood and in Rentham are listed in the first time band of the long-range transportation plan from 2024 to 2028. The next two projects on the list, Rutherford Avenue in Boston and McGrath Boulevard in Somerville, span two time bands. There's funding program for them in the TIP that is in the first time band, 2024 to 2028. And the projects come with additional funding obligations beyond the current TIP, which stretches into the second time band of the long-range transportation plan from 2029 to 2033. And then the final two projects on this list in Framingham and Lexington were listed for the second time band, 2029 through 2033. Next slide, please. So this is looking at the four projects in that second time band, 2029 through 2033. And this shows the estimated costs for those projects based on the information available now, and all these costs reflect estimates of inflation. The project on Rutherford Avenue in Boston is expected to cost $154 million over the course of that 5-year time band, 2029 through 2033. The Framingham project is expected to cost $145.5 million. The Lexington project is expected to cost $57 million, and the McGrath Boulevard project in Somerville, the portion in this time band, is expected to cost $33.8 million. And so the combined cost of those four projects in that time band is expected to be just over $390 million. Next slide, please. So at the last meeting, the board also voted to approve funding allocations in the long range plan and by percentage. And those percentages are shown in the second column of this slide. And so 45% of available funding would go to the Complete Streets program, 30% of the available funding would go to the major infrastructure program, and so on. In the 2019 long range plan, this board voted to make the major infrastructure 30% a cap, such that no more than 30% of available funding would be spent on major infrastructure projects. And so 30% of the available funding in the 29 to 33 time band, total funding available in 29 to 33 is $833 million. And so 30% of that would be just under $250 million, as shown in the second line of this table. But as shown in the previous slide, the combined cost of these four projects that are listed in this time band is $390 million. And so that's $140 million more than is available in funding for this time band. And so staff were hoping to seek guidance from the board as to how to address this discrepancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley. Any comments, change, any questions for anybody, comments? Brian Kane.
Thank you. So I don't want to go through this all over again, but I do want to just reiterate the request I made I think at the end of last meeting, and David, this is more to you and Eric as the vice chair. I asked for kind of an explanation on what I refer to as how a bill becomes a law. So what I'm interested in understanding is how federal funds flow from Washington to here. And I would appreciate that, an understanding of what role MARPA plays, understanding of the agreement you referenced earlier between MAPC, MassDOT, and others, and then sort of how these funds get allocated here, and then what levers the Boston Region MPO has to allocate those, to distribute those. So thank you. That's all I wanted to say.
Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I guess the obvious thing is to go back to the previous slide, to see what the projects are, and then for us to decide whether or not we want to chop out, the $140 million from all of these, or whether we want to chop out less and decrease the allocations to the other areas. And so that's where I would start. And kind of gauging how the members feel about those two options, or whether we can get away with funding any of these less also, so that's where I am.
Eric Barassa.
So maybe one solution could be, and at the end of the day, the projects are the projects, and the programs, are the programs. I kind of feel like, we should just be true to the fact that, there's a lot of support for these projects here. And I think we just need to, David, to your point about just being consistent with what we're kind of showing in the plan. And so one solution could be the Lexington project. And I don't know if anyone is here from Lexington, but my understanding from what that project is basically a very expensive and kind of long complete streets type project is my sense of what it is. And if we just, subtracted, added, moved the complete streets funding that we had, that's in that formula, that bucket into the major infrastructure, does that solve the problem? And we reduce complete streets to match the major infrastructure line. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying. But first, let's, Sheila, do you want to answer Eric's question?
Yes, this is Sheila Page from the town of Lexington. Yes, it is a complete streets project. We're adding multimodal paths, accommodations for transit so they can pull off and pick up people. Yeah, it fits the complete streets project kind of definition. However, it's costly.
So, Eric, yes, going back to your question, we can certainly do that. It begs the question of why we're listing some complete streets projects by name and not others, right?
No, that's not what I'm asking. What I'm saying is, in order to reconcile, keep it a major infrastructure project because our policy calls it a major infrastructure project. Just we will reduce the complete streets percentage from 45 down by the equivalent of the cost of the, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, you would basically take some percentage of complete streets and reduce whatever the share of complete streets that's in major infrastructure, you'd reduce the complete streets percentage from 45 down by that percentage.
Correct. Does that solve the problem?
Well, yes, although I think it solves the problem, but I will note that, again, Bradley, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe that under our policies, the Lexington project as described today is a major infrastructure project. We would just typically not list it in the LRTP and fund it or not in the TIP as a complete streets. But at the last meeting, people were really, really concerned that taking a project out sends a bad signal, and therefore we all agreed to keep it in. And because the only way to keep it in is to label a major infrastructure, we called it a major infrastructure project. I think, is that correct, Brad?
Yeah, so according to the policy this board adopted a few years ago, any project over $50 million is a major infrastructure project.
Okay, so it is a major infrastructure project. But if that's the case, then isn't Western Avenue and Lynn a major infrastructure project? It would have to be separately listed in the RTP. Now you've confused me.
I can't speak to that project. I'm not sure.
Right,
I think there's also a time factor involved also, because the present estimated cost of Lexington is between 40 and 50 million. So if it's ready for construction today, it wouldn't meet the definition. But if you're inflating the cost out into the next time band, then it does rise above the threshold.
I guess I was confused. I thought we'd done away with the cost threshold for the LRT major infrastructure, and it was whether it was at capacity and had not. But I stand corrected. Lynn?
Thank you, Chair. So if we do what Eric suggests, though, I mean, it would take the infrastructure up beyond 30%, though, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right, and that's a cap I think that we really should discuss. I mean, if we're going to go about that cap, I mean, I think we should have a more intense discussion with our colleagues. Can we back up a slide again, please? There's a project that costs under 45 million. So that one, I'm recalling the Framingham one was the one that we kept in because it was in the previous, LRTP, right? Is that the deal?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Because I think I was one who was like saying, "I'll keep it in because it's in the previous one." But the numbers add up very easily. That if we took it out, the problem's gone. All right. My wheels are spinning on that one. But there's a possibility that I'm more inclined to entertain than taking the major infrastructure up over 30%. I mean, I'd more easily entertain dropping that, right now than I would taking the major infrastructure up beyond 30%, where, as I recall that discussion in 3 or 4 years ago, that was a pretty intense discussion. We were like, no, we really didn't want to cap MI. All right, thank you.
Yep. Hey, Grassa.
Sorry, no, I meant to lower my hand, my bad.
Okay, so let me do one last question for staff. Lexington and Framingham, are they the only, is the new project listing now got every project that was listed in the, whatever the last final version of the last plan was? Or are there projects that because nobody brought them up, we didn't have that discussion? Or are these just the two that were going to be dropped out and now they're not going to be dropped out?
So in the April 20th presentation, we went through the list of 18 or so projects that were listed in the 2019 long range plan. And some have been constructed, others are under construction, and others are required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan. And the two projects in Framingham and Lexington were the only two projects that were in the 2019 plan, are not currently programmed for construction, and it was not clear to staff whether they're required to be listed in the 2023 long range plan.
Thank you. Steve Olenoff.
Well, I don't see this as a big problem because we've set that cap, but that's really a goal. That's our own goal. So we can always exceed it if we want to and just explain it. Another thing we can do is just create another category, which is complete streets projects over $50 million. And then that will put the other major projects down to where it should be, and just have this other category showing that we believe it's a complete street project, even though it counts as a major infrastructure problem because it's over 50 million. Does that make sense?
So now, Bradley, go put the other slide on that shows the 117%. So this is the problem. Staff can't put this in the plan, right? Eric has a solution of just reduce complete streets by 17% in this time band and call it a day. I think is our solution, right? Or we could add a new category and reduce, but again, you have to reduce something by 17% to account for the new category. You can't put something out in the public that says, hey, we're going to spend 117% of our money.
Is the problem we're spending too much money, more than we have, or is it just getting it in the right category?
It's just getting it in the right category. We're not spending more money than we have.
Yeah.
But if you look at this, what you think is we are, because they have basically when you reduce let's just for a minute assume that we were going to reduce complete streets by 17% to make the 100% reduction add up. You also have to reduce the accounting for project cost site, right? Right now, because these are the programs are just a percentage of how much money do you have. We say we're going to spend $374 million, $0.9 million on complete streets. The truth is, if you're spending $300 million on these listed projects, you're not spending $374 million on complete streets, or you're not spending $100 million on intersection improvements, or you're not spending it somewhere else, right? Because everything except the project list is a percentage of how much money you have, we are $140,000 over budget in this time band, and that you can't beat. So that some other programs have to be cut by $140 million over a 5-year period.
Yeah, and I just think the simplest thing to do is say complete streets over 50 million per project. And that takes your 17% out of the major infrastructure. And you can see that it is additional complete streets, which is
right, but then you have,
reflecting.
you have two complete streets things. One says complete streets under $50 million will be funded at 200 and what. So it's not at all clear that the Framingham project is a complete street project. Okay, it's a grade separation, right? It's taking a road currently at grade and either putting it on a bridge or burying it. It's not necessarily a complete streets project. It's not. We've only listened to what Lexington is. We don't act for a decision about the complete streets.
Yeah, it's right in the middle of Framingham, and I don't see what else you could call it. If it's so people in traffic can get through the downtown Framingham. So I think would be a complete streets project.
Well, that wouldn't be my definition of a complete streets project. Okay.
Well, because it has so much, being in the middle of the city, it has so much pedestrian oriented and transit oriented aspects to it.
Dennis G. and Betty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, the categories that we use are some of these projects, especially the bigger projects, fall into multiple categories. I mean, I could argue the case that Framingham is not only an intersection improvement project, it is a complete street project, the major infrastructure project, as well as a transit. Obviously, it's that grade, so there's transit elements to that. So the categories, we kind of force it, but I suspect these categories are somewhat limiting because of some of these projects just multi categories. So I could argue the case that like Lexington, that, has multiple aspects to it.
Thank you, Dennis. So staff needs us to tell them what to do. Brad Rawson, did I see your hand up, Brad?
Thank you, Chair. Although I was not at last meeting, I did receive a download from Tom Bent, and I know that this board and staff discussed this issue in a great degree of detail, and that Somerville as intercore rep voted to support Lexington and Framingham. I believe that Eric Bourassa's proposal is worth considering. I do not believe that we need to thrash this around for another 30 minutes, Chair. I believe that you've gotten a sense of the board's dynamics and the tensions here, and we do need to move forward. And overall, I like the direction that Eric was going. I just want to voice my support for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Lynn Diggins.
So regarding the Framingham project, can someone speak to how soon it's likely to be done? That's one question. The other is, if it's not in an LRTP, it can still be, they can still work on it and make the case for why we should include it in the TIP at some point in time, whether it's in the 2933 band or further out, correct?
Yes, but that's the discussion we had last week, and people decided that the fact that it was previously in the TIP, in the plan, overrode those issues. We actually already had that discussion, right? We had a discussion about the fact that it's not going to be in the plan, but it can't be funded in the TIP because we don't even know if it's a major infrastructure / modelable project, right? We had that discussion last week. We don't know yet what that project is.
All right.
The readiness, both of these projects are at 0%, I think, right? They're both at 0%. Will they be ready to be delivered in 2029 to 2033? I don't know, and I wouldn't tell you no, right? I wouldn't tell you no either, though. Okay.
Yeah. Well, okay, right. Well, I don't think it seems to me that Eric's suggesting though it doesn't get us, doesn't solve the over budget issue, whereas taking that Framingham project out does. So
well, to be clear, Eric's suggestion, as I've restated, is to take in this time band only, complete streets and take it down to 28%. Instead of funding $374.9 million of complete streets, we'll fund 234.5. Taking all that $140 million out of the first line. So it sums up to 100% and it sums up to 833.
Okay.
I think that's what Eric was getting at. He certainly was getting at for Lexington. I just threw Framingham in there because, like everybody else, I really want to get to an answer.
Right.
Eric?
Yeah, I'd be interested, in others' thoughts here. I guess my feeling is that I do think these things I think this tension should be reconciled. And I think I was the one who made actually the motion at the last meeting to just adopt this, and I had stepped away from the meeting. I didn't have the full context of the discussion, and so I think we should try to reconcile this with an understanding that the board is supporting these projects. I think reducing the complete streets by some amount, we could even reduce the intersection improvements by a small amount, because I do think that while I would agree that the Framingham project is a major infrastructure project, it has complete streets elements, and it's also about improving an intersection. But I think we should reconcile this in a way that's reasonable. And so I'm happy to make a motion at some point, but it could be that we reduce the complete streets percentage by a little bit. We reduce the intersection improvement by a little bit. I wouldn't want to reduce the other ones because they're already so small. That would be my thinking.
Is there anybody else who wants to comment at this time? Dennis, I see your hand up. Is it still up from last time you commented, or do you want to say something?
No, it's from the last time, sorry.
No worries. All right, Eric, feel free to make a motion. Because you said you would, Eric.
Okay, why don't we need to reduce 17%. Is that correct? So why don't we reduce complete streets by 15% to bring that to 30? And intersection improvements, reduce it by 2% to bring it to 10%. That would be the 17%.
Okay.
That's
Is
my
there
motion.
Thank you, Eric. Is there a second? Brad Rawson.
Second that motion, Mr. Chair.
Motion having been made in second. Please call the roll.
David Muller,
Yes.
Lyris Leotode,
Yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Allie Clayman,
Ally Clayman, yes.
Sarah Lee,
Sarah Lee, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Leonard Diggins,
Leonard Diggins, no.
Matt Moran,
Matt Moran, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Jay Monty,
Jay Monty, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Rob King,
Rob King, yes.
Brad Rawson,
Brad Rawson, yes.
Kristen Guichard,
Kristen Guichard, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Wynn,
Darlene Wynn, yes.
and Steve Olenoff.
Yeah, I still don't think the math works here, because the one, you still have 390 over 833, which is over 30%. So until I can understand this, I'll have to vote no.
Okay, well, that's fine. Clear, the second column now, accounting for project costs, is now going to say complete streets are 30%, major infrastructure is 47, intersections are 10, and that will sum up to 100%. And then the math will be done to take 2% out of intersections and 15% out of the accounting for complete streets. And
Yeah,
so
but
it will all sum up.
the major infrastructure will still say 47% instead of 30.
Yes. In that 5-year band, we're busting the major infrastructure target. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, we're increasing the major infrastructure target from 30 to 47 for that time band.
All right, I'll say yes, but I think you need to really explain that in the long range transportation plan, why that was
Yeah,
exceeded.
I'm relying on Bradley for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. That motion carries. Bradley, you know what you're doing now, right?
Yes, thank you, everyone.
Yep. Next item on the agenda is member items. Are there any? Seeing and hearing none, can we get a motion and a second to adjourn? And please state your name for the record. Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second, Leonard Diggins, second.
Thank you. Motion has been made and seconded. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. See you on the 18th.
So long, bye.
Bye, everybody.